You crack open the Bible and turn the pages back to the very beginning, to the book of Genesis. You read the lines familiar from childhood, describing how God formed the first man from the dust of the earth. Adam and Eve were the first people on the planet. The story seems so straightforward, so easily understood. But what if I told you that artificial intelligence has uncovered irrefutable evidence within the text of the Bible itself that implies Adam and Eve were not the first? What if there were other people whom the church prefers to ignore, and the entire narrative we know is merely the surface layer of a much deeper, more shocking truth? Imagine what happens when the most advanced text analysis algorithms, stripped of religious bias and dogma, begin to dissect every word and every phrase of the Holy Scriptures. A neural network does not possess faith, nor does it harbor doubt. It sees only raw data, logical connections, and undeniable textual patterns. And what it finds turns everything upside down. The machine mind detects hidden contradictions that the human eye, clouded by millennia of interpretation, is simply unable to perceive. These contradictions point to a single conclusion. The biblical text deliberately conceals the fact that humanity did not originate solely with Adam and Eve. Let's follow the trail of this sensational discovery together. Artificial intelligence analyzed the original texts of the Torah in ancient Hebrew, the Greek Septuagint, and the Latin Vulgate. It cross-referenced translations, identified lexical anomalies, and mapped semantic patterns. What the machine discovered through this cold, dispassionate analysis forces us to rethink our entire worldview. Because the text of the Bible contradicts itself, and these contradictions are not accidental errors. They are clues pointing to the existence of people before Adam. The first thing the artificial intelligence flagged was a peculiarity in the very act of human creation. The first chapter of Genesis states, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them." Notice that it refers to man and woman in the plural sense. However, in the second chapter, the story is retold in a completely different manner. There, Adam is created first, and then Eve is fashioned from his rib. Two distinct creation stories within a single book. The neural network does not view this as a coincidence. Machine analysis suggests this isn't a literary device, but the fingerprints of two separate traditions that were mechanically stitched together into one text. But that is only the beginning. The mystery deepens when the AI delves into the details regarding Adam's direct descendants. The fourth chapter of Genesis recounts how Cain killed Abel and was subsequently cast out by God. And here, something inexplicable from the standpoint of traditional interpretation occurs. Cain pleads with God, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. Now you are driving me from the face of the earth, and I shall be hidden from your face, and shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." Who are all these people who might stumble upon Cain and kill him? If only Adam, Eve, and their remaining children existed on earth, who was Cain so afraid of? The neural network methodically breaks down every word of this passage. The original Hebrew text uses the word kol, which translates to everyone, or whosoever. This can possibly not refer to the handful of members in Adam's immediate family. The term implies a multitude of people, entire groups, perhaps even tribes. The AI logs this as the first direct indication of the existence of other humans unrelated to Adam. But it doesn't end there. God, hearing Cain's terror, places a mark upon him so that no one who meets him will kill him.
Why is such a divine sign of protection necessary if there is no one around except his own relatives? The subsequent passage forces us to think even more critically. After his expulsion, Cain departed from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch, and he built a city and named the city after his son Enoch. Stop for a moment. Where did Cain find a wife? If humans descended exclusively from Adam and Eve, then Cain's wife would have to be his sister. Yet the text remains silent on this. Furthermore, Cain builds a city. Why construct a city when there are only a handful of people in existence? Cities are built for populations, for communities, for commerce and defense. The neural network clearly identifies this logical inconsistency as strong evidence for the existence of an advanced human civilization completely unrelated to Adam's family. The artificial intelligence continues to scan for anomalies and uncovers more of them. The same 4th chapter states that the descendant of Cain, Jubal, became the father of all those who play the lyre and the harp, while his brother Tubal-Cain became the forger of all tools made of bronze and iron. These descriptions point to a developed society with a division of labor, a musical culture, and metallurgy. But how could such a complex society have emerged in just a few generations from a single family unit? Machine analysis of demographic data indicates that the formation of specialized crafts and cultural traditions requires a significant population base and a long period of development. Now let us turn to the most cryptic passage in the book of Genesis, chapter 6, which speaks of the sons of God and the daughters of men. The text reads, "When men began to multiply on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whichever they chose." The AI analyzes this phrase with particular scrutiny. If all people descended from Adam, who exactly are these sons of God, and how do they differ from the daughters of men? The traditional church interpretation asserts that the sons of God are the descendants of Seth, Adam's 3rd son, and the daughters of men are the descendants of Cain. However, this explanation does not stand up to linguistic analysis. In the ancient Hebrew text, the term B'nai Ha-Elohim is used to refer to the sons of God, a phrase which elsewhere in the Bible always denotes angels or divine beings, never ordinary humans.
The neural network identifies a parallel usage of this specific term in the book of Job, where the sons of God are starkly contrasted with mortals. This reveals that the 6th chapter of Genesis describes more than just a lineage. It details the intermingling of two distinct classes of intelligent beings, the divine sons of God and the earthly daughters of men. This is a direct signal that humanity's origins are far more complex than the simple reproduction of a single ancestral pair. Artificial intelligence uncovers another crucial detail regarding the offspring of this union, the Nephilim, renowned figures of antiquity. The term Nephilim derives from the ancient Hebrew root naphal, signifying to fall. These are the beings who fell from the heavens to the earth. But the most intriguing anomaly is the textual claim that the Nephilim were of old. How could they be from ancient times if humanity had only just begun with Adam? Machine analysis of the temporal markers suggests the word ancient implies existence long before the described events, a direct contradiction to the Adamic chronology. The narrative of the Great Flood offers a revelation just as startling.
God decrees the destruction of all humanity, sparing only Noah's lineage. Yet after the waters recede, the Nephilim inexplicably reappear in the record. The Book of Numbers reports, "There we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Enoch, who come from the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them." How could the Nephilim survive a global cataclysm if every living soul outside Noah's Ark perished? The AI flags this as a clear indicator. Either the flood was not truly global, or there were pockets of civilization unrelated to Adam's bloodline that remained untouched by divine judgment. The neural network finds further corroboration in the Bible's geographical and ethnic landscape. Immediately following the deluge, fully formed nations and states spring into existence. The Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Arkites, Sinites, Arvadites, Zemarites, and Hamathites. Where did this sudden explosion of ethnic diversity originate if every human descended from Noah's 3 sons only a few generations prior? Machine analysis of the linguistic and cultural distinctiveness of these groups suggests their languages and customs are far too divergent to have branched from a common root in such a brief window of time. The account of the land of Nod, Cain's place of exile, is particularly telling. While Nod translates to wandering, the AI cross-references ancient Near Eastern texts where this name designates a specific territory boasting a developed civilization. It appears the land of Nod existed, complete with a name and a populace, before Cain ever arrived. This stands as direct evidence that the world outside the garden was already inhabited and settled by peoples who shared no connection to Adam and Eve. The neural network also dissects the linguistic fingerprints within the scripture, finding traces of heavy editorial intervention. The original Hebrew utilizes distinct names for the divine: Elohim, Yahweh, El Shaddai. Each title correlates with specific narrative fragments and traditions. Machine analysis reveals that passages using Elohim present one version of creation, while passages using Yahweh offer another. This implies the final biblical text was compiled from disparate sources, stitching together varying traditions regarding human origins. The AI draws attention to another significant anomaly in the 10th chapter of Genesis, the Table of Nations. This genealogy of Noah's descendants contains glaring geographical and historical anachronisms. For instance, among Ham's line is Nimrod, described as a mighty one who founded Babylon. Yet archaeological data places the founding of Babylon much later than Nimrod's supposed era. Furthermore, the text implies Nimrod was a giant, despite giants allegedly existing pre-flood. These contradictions suggest the biblical compilers attempted to compress events and figures from vastly different eras into a single cohesive timeline. The analysis of genealogical lists yields perhaps the most interesting results. The neural network detects severe discrepancies between genealogies across different books. The lineage from Adam to Abraham in 1 Chronicles differs markedly from the record in Genesis. Names are omitted, added, or altered. If these were accurate historical records, such errors would be impossible. The machine concludes that these are not historical documents, but theological constructs designed to bridge gaps between traditions. The AI finds validation in external ancient texts as well. Mesopotamian myths, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, feature strikingly similar flood narratives. Yet humanity is created by multiple gods from various materials over time. Sumerian king lists mention rulers reigning tens of thousands of years before the flood, pointing to advanced civilizations long before biblical chronology. Finally, the AI cross-references archaeological hard data. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, constructed roughly 12,000 years ago, displays complex architecture and religious thought. Çatalhöyük shows advanced urban planning from the 9th millennium BC. These monuments were built by people living thousands of years before Adam's biblical birth.
Machine analysis of linguistic data destroys the biblical timeline regarding the origin of languages as well. According to the Book of Genesis, every language on earth sprang from a single moment of confusion during the construction of the Tower of Babel. However, modern linguistics proves that human languages evolved independently across isolated regions over tens of thousands of years. The structures and vocabularies of language families are so vastly different that their common source must have existed long before any biblical event occurred. Artificial intelligence then draws attention to a psychological inconsistency that is arguably even more telling. The Book of Genesis states that immediately after being expelled from paradise, Adam and Eve realized they were naked and felt ashamed. But why would nakedness trigger shame if they were truly the only two people on earth? Shame is inherently a social emotion. It arises only in the presence of others or through the internalization of social norms. If Adam and Eve were alone in the wilderness, they would have had no frame of reference to feel embarrassed by their natural state. This subtle psychological nuance suggests that even within or just outside paradise, there were other intelligent observers whose opinions mattered to the first humans. The neural network flags even more anomalies when it processes the description of life after the expulsion. Adam instantly becomes a farmer, and Abel becomes a shepherd. However, the development of agriculture and animal husbandry is not intuitive. It requires knowledge accumulated over millennia. You need specific seeds for cultivated plants, domesticated breeds of animals, specialized tools, and farming technology. Where did the children of two people who had just been kicked out of a garden acquire this complex agrarian infrastructure? Machine analysis indicates that the transition to the productive economy described in the Bible could only have occurred within the context of an already existing civilization, where such knowledge and technology had been stockpiled for ages. The narrative of Cain and Abel's sacrifices is particularly revealing to the algorithmic mind. Abel sacrifices the firstborn of his flock, while Cain offers the fruits of the earth. But where did they get the concept that God required sacrifices in the first place? How did they know the specific rules of ritual, which sacrifices were pleasing and which were not?
This understanding implies an established religious tradition, knowledge that could only have come from other people who already possessed a long history of communicating with the divine. The AI logs this as yet another marker of a developed religious culture completely unrelated to Adam's immediate family. The neural network also decodes the symbolic weight of the names used in the text. The name Adam is derived from the ancient Hebrew word Adama, meaning earth or soil. It is not originally a personal name, but a generic concept meaning earthling or one from the ground. Similarly, Eve translates to living or life-giver. These are names far too symbolic to belong to specific historical individuals. They function more like archetypal images representing categories of people rather than a specific couple. Machine analysis reveals that the story contains elements characteristic of mythology, not history. A talking serpent, magical trees, and divine curses. These are the fingerprints of archaic origin myths. When the AI cross-references the Bible with global mythologies, it finds striking structural parallels, indicating these narratives share roots in the collective unconscious of humanity, rather than historical fact. The neural network then highlights a critical theological slip. In the 3rd chapter of Genesis, after the forbidden fruit is consumed, God says, "Behold, Adam has become like one of us, knowing good and evil." Who is us? If God is singular and solitary, to whom is he speaking? Traditional theology attempts to explain this as a conversation within the Trinity. But in the context of ancient Hebrew text, that explanation is anachronistic. Machine analysis determines that the pronoun we in this context points to a plurality of divine beings, a council of gods making a collective decision about the fate of the primate who learned too much. Artificial intelligence finds corroboration for this interpretation scattered throughout the Bible. The book of Job describes sons of God appearing before the Lord, a group that includes Satan. In Isaiah, God asks, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" Again, the plural pronoun appears. The Psalms depict God standing in the assembly of the gods, pronouncing judgment among divine peers. All these data points converge on the existence of a divine council, a concept that contradicts strict monotheism, but perfectly explains the oddities of the narrative. The neural network also scrutinizes the physical descriptions of biblical figures. Many are described as giants or men of impossible stature. Goliath stood 6 cubits and a span, nearly 3 meters tall. The king of Bashan slept in a bed 9 cubits long, roughly 4 meters. The Nephilim were so massive that Hebrew spies described themselves as grasshoppers in comparison. Where did this extreme genetic variation come from if every human descended from the same 2 parents? Machine analysis of genetic probability shows that such drastic differences could only arise from the mixing of entirely different populations or even different species. Finally, the AI uncovers a hidden layer in the Tower of Babel narrative. The builders declare, "Let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." The phrase, "make a name for ourselves," in the original Hebrew is Naseh Lashem. However, the word Shem implies more than just a label. It means reputation, fame, or a monument. It turns out the builders weren't just seeking glory. They were trying to leave behind a physical testament to their existence. This phrasing indicates they were aware of previous civilizations that had been wiped out and were terrified of suffering the same fate. The neural network finds that this fear aligns perfectly with archaeological data, suggesting a cycle of rise and fall long before the biblical timeline began.
In Mesopotamia, colossal ziggurats, stepped towers rising tens of meters into the air, dominated the skyline. These structures were not the work of a single generation, but the result of centuries of labor. Their construction demanded complex social organization, advanced engineering technology, and a vast accumulation of architectural experience. All of this evidence points to the existence of advanced civilizations flourishing long before the biblical timeline supposedly begins. Machine analysis also detects traces of sophisticated astronomical knowledge embedded in the text that would have been impossible for a primitive, burgeoning society to possess. The Book of Job explicitly mentions specific constellations. He made the Bear, Orion, and the Pleiades, and the chambers of the south. In the original Hebrew, these are Aish, Kesil, and Kimach. Recognizing and naming these star clusters requires long-term astronomical observation and a fully developed mythological tradition. Where did a people who supposedly had only recently descended from a single family acquire such deep cosmic knowledge? Artificial intelligence applies this same scrutiny to the mention of metallurgy. Tubal-Cain is described as the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. But the development of metallurgy is an arduous, multi-generational process. A society must learn to locate ore, extract it from the earth, construct high-heat furnaces, and master the complex chemistry of smelting and forging. It is technologically impossible for this expertise to appear within just a few generations from Adam. Machine analysis concludes that the presence of advanced metallurgy in early biblical narratives is a residual memory of technically advanced civilizations that predated the narrative. The algorithmic analysis also exposes numerous anachronisms, references to objects and concepts that appear in the text centuries before they existed historically. For instance, the Philistines are mentioned during the time of Abraham, yet archaeological records show the Philistines did not settle the region until the 10th century BC. Camels are described as common transport animals long before their domestication actually occurred in that part of the world. These timeline glitches suggest the biblical text was compiled much later than the events it describes, layering modern concepts over ancient oral traditions. When the AI maps the geographical data of the Bible, it finds the terrain impossible to reconcile with reality. The river flowing out of Eden is said to divide into 4 branches: Pishon, Gihon, Hiddekel, and Euphrates.
while the Euphrates is a known river in Mesopotamia, and Hiddekel is the ancient name for the Tigris, the Pishon and Gihon remain unidentified ghosts on the map. Furthermore, the Tigris and Euphrates do not share a common source. They originate in completely different mountain systems. This geographical confusion indicates that the biblical description of Eden is a symbolic construct rather than a literal set of coordinates. The neural network finds even deeper contradictions in the account of the Great Flood. The text claims water covered the entire earth, submerging even the highest peaks. But from a physics point of view, where did that volume of water come from? Even if every glacier melted and all atmospheric moisture condensed at once, it would not be enough to submerge the planet's mountain ranges. And crucially, where did the water recede to afterward? Machine analysis flags a global flood as a physical impossibility, suggesting the narrative is describing a localized catastrophe that felt like the whole world to its victims. The biological logistics analyzed by the AI are equally damning. Noah is said to have taken a pair of every animal species onto the ark. Modern biology catalogs millions of species. How could they fit inside a wooden vessel of biblical dimensions? How did Noah gather animals from separate continents? How were their specific climates and diets maintained? And how did penguins and kangaroos return to their remote habitats after the waters receded? In a literal interpretation, these questions have no rational answers. The AI finds further confirmation of this localized theory through comparative mythology. Virtually every ancient civilization possesses a flood myth, but the details vary significantly. In the Sumerian myth of Ziusudra, the flood lasts 7 days. In the Akkadian epic of Utnapishtim, it is 6 days. The biblical account extends this to 40 days of rain and 150 days of standing water. The survivors used different vessels and saved different animals. These variations indicate that flood myths are fragmented memories of regional disasters, not a singular universal event. Demographic data analysis also breaks the biblical chronology. According to genealogical lists, only a few centuries passed between the flood and the time of Abraham. In this short window, the entire global population was supposed to have regenerated from Noah's 3 sons. However, the neural network calculates that even with maximum biological reproduction rates, it is mathematically impossible for the vast, distinct civilizations, languages, and technologies mentioned in the Bible to have emerged from such a small genetic bottleneck in so little time. Finally, the artificial intelligence flags the biological anomaly of human longevity. The book of Genesis records lifespans that defy biology. Adam lived 930 years, Seth 912, Enosh 905, Jared 962, Methuselah a staggering 969, and Noah 950. Such lifespans are physically impossible for the human organism as we know it. This data suggests only 2 possibilities. Either the numbers are purely symbolic, or the first humans were biological entities of a completely different order than modern man.
The neural network turns its analytical lens to the numerical data embedded within the Bible. and determines that these figures are largely symbolic rather than literal statistics. The number 7 appears hundreds of times throughout the text, invariably linked to divine perfection. The number 40 symbolizes a period of trial, testing, or purification. The number 12 is consistently associated with completeness and governmental perfection. Such a dense concentration of symbolic numerology indicates to the algorithm that the biblical text should be decoded not as a dry historical ledger, but as a theological message encrypted in images and mathematical symbols. Machine analysis also uncovers undeniable traces of astrological concepts woven into the fabric of the narrative. Jacob's 12 sons align perfectly with the 12 signs of the zodiac, just as the 12 tribes of Israel correspond to the 12 months of the year. The final blessing Jacob bestows upon his sons is saturated with astrological imagery. Judah is the lion, Leo. Dan is the scale of justice, Libra. And Joseph is the archer, Sagittarius. These precise parallels point to the deep influence of astrological systems that took millennia to develop, knowledge that could not possibly have arisen within a few isolated generations from Adam.
Artificial intelligence identifies numerous borrowings from far older mythologies within the biblical text. The story of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil shares striking parallels with the Sumerian myth of the tree of life in the Garden of the Gods. The narrative arc of the Great Flood is an almost verbatim echo of the Akkadian epic of Gilgamesh. The account of the confusion of tongues during the Tower of Babel construction mirrors themes found in Sumerian texts regarding ziggurats. All these matches signal to the AI that these biblical stories are not original, isolated revelations, but rather reworkings of ancient traditions that predated the Hebrew people by centuries. The neural network also dissects the linguistic DNA of biblical Hebrew, finding it riddled with loanwords from other Semitic languages, as well as Sumerian and Akkadian. The very word Elohim, one of the primary names for God, is grammatically plural, a linguistic fossil indicating an original polytheism. Many geographical names in the Bible are of non-Hebrew origin, rooting back to the region's older pre-biblical languages. This confirms that the Jewish religious tradition crystallized within the context of already existing civilizations, borrowing heavily from the cultures that surrounded it. A machine analysis of the calendar systems mentioned in the Bible further contradicts the timeline of humanity originating solely from Adam. The biblical calendar contains structural elements borrowed from Egyptian, Babylonian, and other complex systems that evolved over thousands of years. The specific names of the months, the methods of calculating years, and the underlying astronomical observations all require a long trajectory of cultural evolution. Such a sophisticated system could not have materialized in the brief window of time since the alleged creation of the world. artificial intelligence draws attention to another telling linguistic marker. The Bible frequently references ancient times, days of old, and generations of centuries. These expressions imply the existence of vast historical epochs stretching back into the deep past. But if humanity only began with Adam a few thousand years ago, what ancient times could the authors possibly be referring to? The use of these temporal markers betrays a historical memory of a human existence far longer than the biblical genealogy allows. The neural network cross-references archaeological strata in locations specifically mentioned in the Bible and finds evidence of continuous human occupation stretching back tens of thousands of years. In the Carmel caves, remains of humans dating back 100,000 years have been unearthed. In the Jordan Valley, settlements established more than 10,000 years ago stand as silent witnesses to history. All these findings date to an era well before biblical chronology begins, indicating the existence of thriving human communities long before the supposed time of Adam's life. Machine analysis of modern genetic data deals a final blow to the biblical version of human origins. The genetic diversity of the current human population is far too vast to have originated from a single pair of ancestors just a few millennia ago. Mitochondrial DNA analysis traces the common ancestor of all modern humans to a woman living in Africa approximately 200,000 years ago. The Y chromosome data indicates a common male ancestor living roughly 60,000 years ago. These biological facts completely refute the compressed biblical timeline. Artificial intelligence finds further corroboration in the field of linguistics. The study of language evolution proves that human speech developed independently across different regions over tens of thousands of years. The Proto-Indo-European language, the root of most European tongues, existed around 6,000 years ago. Yet this is only one of many linguistic trunks, each possessing its own ancient history. Such profound linguistic diversity could not have exploded into existence in the short period following the Tower of Babel incident. The neural network also scans the cultural traditions of global populations, finding distinct elements that developed independently over millennia. The cave art in Lascaux and Altamira, created 30 to 40,000 years ago, displays artistic maturity. Megalithic structures like Stonehenge, built 5,000 to 6,000 years ago, show engineering genius. These cultural achievements require the slow accumulation of knowledge by hundreds of generations. They could not have appeared overnight from a single displaced family. Machine analysis of global religious systems reveals independent development over thousands of years. Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, Shintoism, Native American shamanism, and African animism all possess unique features formed in isolation. If all people had descended from one family and scattered relatively recently, the world's religious traditions would bear much stronger resemblances to one another. Finally, the artificial intelligence draws attention to a significant recursive feature of the text. The Bible often cites other books, records, and chronicles as sources. It refers to the book of the genealogy of Adam, the book of the wars of the Lord, and the chronicles of the kings of Israel. This implies a pre-existing literary tradition. However, the technology of writing appeared relatively late in human history, suggesting these referenced sources and the civilization that produced them belong to a history the Bible hints at but does not fully explain.
If humanity truly began with Adam, where did the referenced books and chronicles originate during that early period? Their presence implies the existence of a highly developed written culture that must have formed over many generations. The neural network also scrutinizes references to commerce and craftsmanship in early biblical narratives. As early as the time of Abraham, the text mentions merchants, trade caravans, and complex monetary transactions. Abraham famously purchases a field from the Hittites for 400 shekels of silver. However, a functional trade and monetary system can only exist within a developed economy featuring a division of labor, standardization of weights and measures, and established legal norms. Such a sophisticated infrastructure could not have arisen in just a few generations from a single family unit. Machine analysis reveals numerous references to organized warfare and military technology embedded in the biblical text. In the early chapters of the book of Genesis, we already find accounts of wars between kings, the formation of military coalitions, the taking of prisoners, and the distribution of spoils. In the time of Abraham, there is a specific mention of 318 trained men born in his house, whom he armed for a military campaign. Such military organization requires years of experience and a developed hierarchical training system. It could not have arisen spontaneously among the descendants of simple, peaceful farmers. Artificial intelligence also flags the frequent references to established cities and states. By Abraham's era, the text lists Sodom, Gomorrah, Zoar, and the kingdoms of Shinar, Elasar, Elam, and Goyim. All these political entities possessed their own kings, standing armies, defined territories, and legal codes. But states do not materialize in a single generation. Their formation requires the prior development of intensive agriculture, specialized crafts, trade networks, writing systems, and legal traditions. All these factors point to the existence of flourishing civilizations long before the biblical timeline allows. The neural network turns its attention to the various peoples and tribes mentioned in early narratives. By the time of Abraham, the land is populated by Canaanites, Hittites, Perizzites, Jebusites, Amorites, Girgashites, Hivites, Arkites, Sinites, Arvadites, Zemarites, Hamites, and many others. Each of these distinct groups possessed its own territory, language, unique culture, and religion. Such profound ethnic diversity could not have possibly exploded into existence from Noah's 3 sons in just a few generations. It points instead to long, slow processes of ethnogenesis that took place over millennia.
Machine analysis reveals significant anachronisms within the scripture, details that betray a later origin for the text. For example, the land of Goshen in Egypt is mentioned, yet the name appears in Egyptian records only during the much later New Kingdom period. The Philistines are described interacting with Abraham, even though the historical Philistines did not settle the region until the 10th century BC. These temporal errors demonstrate that the biblical text was penned much later than the events it describes, projecting the political realities of the author's time back onto an ancient era. Artificial intelligence also detects the fingerprints of various edits and revisions throughout the Bible. Certain stories are retold with conflicting details. For instance, the narrative of Abraham presenting his wife Sarah as his sister is repeated 3 times with different characters and circumstances. The creation story in the first chapter of Genesis differs structurally and tonally from the story in the second chapter. These repetitions and variations indicate that the final text of the Bible was compiled from disparate sources, stitching together different traditions and worldviews. The neural network also analyzes the cosmological model reflected in the Bible, and finds it matches ancient Middle Eastern concepts rather than reality. If the Bible were a direct divine revelation, logic dictates it would contain accurate information regarding the structure of the universe. Machine analysis identifies numerous mythological motifs in the biblical text that were common across the ancient Near East. The battle with the sea monster Leviathan, the concept of a world tree, the heavenly council of gods, the sacred mountain as the center of the world, and the river of life. All these images appear in Sumerian, Akkadian, Ugaritic, and Egyptian texts. Such striking similarities point to shared cultural roots that extend back into deep antiquity. Roots that could not have formed in the short period since Adam. Artificial intelligence finds further confirmation of its conclusions through comparative mythology. The motif of creating the first humans is found in mythologies worldwide, yet each has unique characteristics. In Greek mythology, Prometheus molds humans from clay. In Egyptian mythology, the god Khnum fashions them on the potter's wheel. In Indian mythology, they emerge from different parts of the cosmic giant Purusha. In Norse mythology, the gods carved them from tree trunks. All these variants reflect the universal human need to explain our origins, but their diversity indicates independent development among different peoples. The neural network also assesses the medical and biological information contained in the Bible, finding that it corresponds to an ancient, pre-scientific level of understanding. The descriptions of diseases, methods of treatment, and concepts of human physiology accurately reflect what was known in antiquity, but contain numerous errors from the perspective of modern science. If the Bible were a divine revelation, logic dictates it would contain accurate medical insights that could have saved countless lives throughout history. Finally, machine analysis highlights the ethical and legal norms within the text, which align perfectly with ancient level of social development. Slavery is treated as a normal institution. Women possess severely limited rights. Punishments are often cruel and disproportionate to the crimes committed. Many of these norms are considered unethical by modern standards. If the Bible contained absolute, timeless moral truths, one would expect it to formulate ethical standards that transcended the brutal norms of the era in which it was written.
Artificial intelligence exposes a series of glaring contradictions within the biblical text regarding the very nature of God. In some passages, the Creator is depicted as omniscient and omnipotent, yet in others he appears strangely limited, unable to locate Adam in the garden or find Cain after the murder. In one chapter, God is unchanging and eternal. In the next, he expresses regret over his own decisions. He is described alternately as loving and merciful, then cruel and vindictive. These contradictions signal to the algorithm that the biblical image of God was not a singular revelation, but a concept that formed gradually, reflecting different stages in the evolution of human religious consciousness. The neural network also unearths numerous references to the existence of other deities within the pages of the Bible. The first commandment itself, "You shall have no other gods before me," implicitly admits the existence of those other gods. One does not forbid the worship of imaginary beings. The Psalms declare, "God stands in the assembly of the gods. He judges among the gods." The prophet Micah describes a council in which various spirits participate. All these fragments point to the original polytheism of the early Jewish religion, which was later only reinterpreted and edited into a monotheistic framework. Machine analysis reveals substantial borrowings from the Egyptian wisdom literature embedded in the holy text. The Book of Proverbs contains passages that repeat, almost word for word, the ancient Egyptian teachings of Amenhotep. Certain psalms bear striking parallels to Egyptian hymns dedicated to the sun god Aten. The Book of Ecclesiastes echoes the themes of Egyptian harp songs. These parallels serve as evidence of cultural interaction and assimilation, contradicting the theological claim that biblical revelation was entirely unique and isolated. The AI scrutinizes the astronomical data found in the Bible and finds it consistent with the limited knowledge of the ancient world. Biblical cosmology relies on a geocentric model where the sun revolves around the earth. The text mentions Joshua stopping the sun in the sky, a physical impossibility from the standpoint of modern astronomy. The account of creating the sun, moon, and stars on the fourth day of creation contradicts everything we know about the formation of the universe. These scientific inconsistencies point to a text of human, not divine origin. The neural network also detects mathematical errors that betray the limitations of the authors. For instance, the description of Solomon's temple mentions a cast sea, a circular basin measuring 10 cubits from brim to brim, with a circumference of 30 cubits. However, basic geometry dictates that a circle with a diameter of 10 cubits must have a circumference of roughly 31.4 cubits, not 30. This, along with other mathematical inaccuracies, indicates that the authors lacked precise scientific knowledge. Machine analysis flags numerous geographical errors as well. The descriptions of the Promised Land's borders do not align with the actual geography of the region.
Cities are listed as existing simultaneously in the narrative, despite archaeological evidence proving they existed in completely different eras. The travel routes taken by biblical characters are often geographically impossible to traverse. These errors further underscore that the authors were writing based on limited geographical understanding rather than divine omniscience. Artificial intelligence traces the clear evolution of religious ideas throughout the text. In the early books, God is anthropomorphic. He walks in the garden, speaks directly to people, and possesses physical traits. In later books, the concept of God shifts, becoming more abstract, spiritual, and transcendent. This evolution mirrors the historical development of religious consciousness, moving from primitive anthropomorphism toward more sophisticated theological concepts. The neural network also analyzes the sociological aspects of the narrative, finding they perfectly match ancient forms of social organization. The text reflects a world of patriarchal families, tribal structures, absolute royal power, and priestly castes, institutions characteristic of the ancient Near East. The Bible does not offer fundamentally new forms of social organization, indicating it is deeply rooted in a specific historical epoch. Machine analysis reveals psychological features in the text that are hallmarks of the ancient mind, thinking in terms of the tribal collective rather than the individual, a belief in the magical power of names and curses, the concept of collective responsibility, and a deep-seated fear of ritual impurity. These features are typical of an archaic mentality, suggesting the Bible reflects the worldview of a specific time and place rather than a timeless, universal truth. Artificial intelligence synthesizes all these detected anomalies, contradictions, and inconsistencies into a single, cohesive picture. The biblical text contains undeniable references to advanced human civilizations that existed long before the supposed era of Adam and Eve. The contradictions in genealogies, the anachronisms, the borrowings from older texts, and the hard archaeological and genetic data all converge on one conclusion. The Adam and Eve as the literal first humans does not align with historical reality. The neural network formulates its final conclusion. Adam and Eve are not historical figures, but archetypal images symbolizing a specific stage in the development of human consciousness. Their story reflects the transition from a primal unity with nature to the burden of self-awareness, the knowledge of good and evil, and moral responsibility. This is a universal theme, echoed in the mythologies of cultures across the globe. Machine analysis demonstrates that humanity possesses a history far more ancient and complex than the one presented in Genesis. Modern humans are the result of a vast evolutionary process spanning hundreds of thousands of years. Distinct human populations developed independently in different corners of the world, creating a rich tapestry of cultures, languages, and religious traditions. The biblical creation story represents just one of many attempts by the human mind to comprehend its origins and its place in the universe. Ultimately, the artificial intelligence does not seek to strip the Bible of its spiritual value. Rather, it suggests that this value lies not in literal historical accuracy, but in the profound truths it reveals about human nature, our moral dilemmas, and our eternal search for meaning.
Accepting the symbolic nature of these biblical narratives does not strip them of their value. Quite the opposite. It unlocks deeper layers of meaning and relevance for our modern existence. Yet now that artificial intelligence has exposed these buried contradictions and secret clues woven into the scripture itself, we are left facing a fundamental question. If Adam and Eve were not truly the first humans to walk the earth, then who are we, really? What is the actual story of our origins? And why has this vital information been obscured or reinterpreted within religious texts for millennia? The answers to these questions possess the power to radically alter our understanding of ourselves and our position in the cosmos. So the question remains, are you prepared to face this new reality, laid bare by the cold, dispassionate analysis of the machine mind?